Welcome into 247 Sports Live. I'm Emily Proud. We appreciate you joining us live on YouTube, and we'll begin the show as we always do with my hopeful, kind plea for you to hit that like button and make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. We do appreciate it. Let's go ahead and tell you what's on tap for today's show. We got a lot to talk about in different sports, not just football, that's right. But first, football, of course. All my Nittany Lions fans, listen up. Tyler Donohue of Lions 247 joins us to break down Penn State's upcoming season. No divisions, no problems, we discuss. And it's June, which means the College World Series is top of mind. But first, Super Regionals. We have a full preview coming up. Plus, which freshman quarterbacks will we see in year one? We bring in someone who has seen this class play since they were basically freshmen in high school. So let's start, though, by reminding you who the top 10 quarterbacks in the 2024 class are. You got DJ Lagway with a very special senior season coming out on top of the rankings. Nebraska's Dylan Raiola, close behind. Julian Sayin, who is now at Ohio State, if you weren't paying attention, rounding out the top three. Rounding out this show, we welcome in our friend and national recruiting analyst, Cooper Petagna. Cooper's got a story up right now on CBSSports.com, ranking these quarterbacks not from the recruiting rankings, we've done enough of that, but from the most likelihood that they will play in year one. So starting at the top of your rankings, the number one quarterback you have, Dylan Raiola at Nebraska. What makes him most likely to play in year one?
Well, I think this one makes way too much sense, Emily, when you look at Dylan Raiola, Nebraska, this marriage under Matt Rule going into year two in Lincoln. So many expectations for the former five-star top 10 player in the country per 247 Sports. But you look at Nebraska's situation, it's an interesting one, and one for a true freshman. When you step into it, 5 of the first 6 games are at home for Nebraska, and you look at opponents like Northern Iowa, UTEP, Colorado in there with one of the worst passing defenses in the country. It makes a lot of sense for Dylan Raiola. And the other part of this is Nebraska had the 126th ranked passing offense in the country last year. So this is a situation where I think Nebraska, Dylan Raiola, for a young true freshman, even though there are some expectations floating around year two under Matt Rule, it makes a lot of sense. The biggest thing that they need, play calling, protection, playmakers, is the environment going to be right for him. But in terms of the skill set, he's 6'3", he's 220 pounds. We know his dad was an offensive lineman in the league for 11 years and in the Ring of Honor at Nebraska. So he's got the physical stature. He's got the deep ball to him. They got guys like Malachi Coleman. I think we're going to see him sooner rather than later, even if it's not week one.
Certainly hope the fan base there offers him some grace as well. We love to watch true freshman quarterbacks. I know you do because you've been watching them for so many years. You want to see what they look like in college. But there is a learning curve sometime. How about the number one quarterback in the class, but number 2 on your list here, and that's Florida's DJ Lagway. As we all know, they've got Graham Mertz, so the path isn't as clear as it is for Raiola, but barring some sort of injury, what would have to happen for Lagway to play?
Yeah, circumstance gets baked into the cake here when you're kind of evaluating these young freshman quarterback. And for Billy Napier, they have to win this year in Gainesville. And I think that's where DJ Lagway comes in. He's one of the most talented quarterbacks we've seen at the position in quite some time, and a guy that has all the ability to be the face of this program for the next 3 to 4 years. So for Billy Napier and DJ Lagway, sure, it makes a lot of sense to play him early, kind of show a little bit of the future. When you're a guy that's 11-14 in his first 2 years in the swamp, there's a lot of expectations. But DJ Lagway is a guy that can step in and play early. I mean, you look at some of the names in the past that have played early at the quarterback position for Florida, Anthony Richardson, the most recent, guys like Tim Tebow, Cam Newton, they all had a certain skill set that they can provide immediately from day one. And DJ Lagway, the guy that almost rushed for 1,000 yards as a senior, I love the arm as well. You like Graham Mertz. You like the prospect of Graham Mertz being a guy that's probably going to play in the NFL very soon as well. But DJ Lagway, just in terms of what he can give you, I think this is a Florida team that can use a little bit of an infusion, especially on the ground. They got to find a way to get him involved. So I expect to see him very, very early. Tough schedule. If things get tough, maybe we see more of him.
Very, very tough schedule. Again, I implore you to go check out his article at CBSSports.com because, Cooper, you don't just rank these quarterbacks, you also give them some fun descriptors. So I'm going to start reading these because I love them. For Washington's Damon Williams, you describe him as probably not, but maybe. What was your thought process there?
Well, this is a guy at Washington. He steps into a pretty healthy situation at the quarterback position. You think of Will Rogers coming over from Mississippi State, very experienced pocket passer. He started over 40 games. So Jedd Fisch has that guy with a roster that is undergoing a lot of changes right now. They only returned 33% of their production. They lost over 600 career starts at UW. And even though it's a team coming off a national championship, I think this is going to be a team that's going to be licking their wounds a little bit. It's going to be hard for them to kind of get into that postseason conversation. So enter Damon Williams, a guy that has already been pushing Will Rogers. He offers something very different. He is not a statue in the pocket. He's a dynamic guy. He's very comfortable on the perimeter, on the move. He's got that kind of point guard mentality and a skill set that Jedd Fisch and his staff, they're very familiar with. Noah Fafita, you see the things that he's been able to accomplish with Tutoria McMillan at Arizona. So he kind of gives them that little wrinkle. And, the same thing here, you kind of evaluate the schedule 9-10 weeks in the season. Maybe expectations aren't being met. This is a quick pivot, another option for Jedd Fisch to say, you know what, let's invest in the future. Let's get Damon Williams some more run. And this is going to be the guy that's going to take us the rest of the way.
All right, Julian Sayin has had a complicated offseason from the standpoint of he was part of Alabama's recruiting class in 2024, but ended up transferring to Ohio State, which a lot of people transferred to Ohio State this offseason. But when you look at this quarterback room, man, it is stacked. But you described this as don't say we didn't warn you. What could potentially push Sayin to start a game this fall?
There's some murmurs about Julian Sayin. They like him a lot at Ohio State, and for good reason. There's been a lot of change, and there are a lot of new faces at Ohio State. You talk about Will Howard coming over from Kansas State. He started 27 games. Outside of that, a lot of talent, but a lot of inexperience. What happens with Devin Brown? What happens with Lincoln Kineholz? Air Nolan coming in as well. Julian Sayin's a guy that's turned a lot of heads as a true freshman. You look at Ohio State, what they've done via the transfer portal. They bring over Quinshaw Judkins. You have the number one player in the country in Jeremiah Smith, an experienced offensive line coming back. The supporting cast in the expectations in Columbus is there to compete for a national championship. They need somebody to keep them ahead of the sticks. Julian Sayin, out of the three quarterbacks that we've talked about already, three guys that were named five-star, Lagway, Raiola, and Sayin, he's the most polished. And I think he's in a position to play early. But I think, I bring up those three Ps, the play caller, the playmakers, and protection. Ohio State gives a young true freshman the best chance of being successful early. So I don't know if he's going to be the guy, but I expect Ryan Day, his staff, certainly to work with some urgency to find a way to get him on the field and maybe see that they have something more ready to play, ready to make an impact a lot sooner than anybody thought.
You've certainly sold me on that. Let's go to your last quarterback, Auburn's Walker White. You describe him as, quote, unlikely, but crazier things have happened. What would have to happen for this crazy thing to happen?
Well, here's our wild card here. A lot would have to happen. I think Auburn is in a pretty comfortable position with Peyton Thorne and who they bring back, Hank Brown, also Holden Garner as well. They got three guys that they like. Last year, you saw a two-quarterback system, Peyton Thorne. You also saw a little bit of Robbie Ashford. He transferred out of there. Walker White is just a guy that is oozing with physical traits in upside, and a guy that we kind of saw as a raw developmental prospect. We got him in the All-American Bowl. He flashed a lot. Pro comp to Will Levis right here in Nashville with the Tennessee Titans. So you get the idea of who this guy is and what he's about. 6'3", 220 pounds. He can give you a little bit on the ground as well. I just think if Auburn's in one of those situations where they can afford to get Walker White on the field, I think that's going to be really tempting for Hugh Freeze, because you think about the playmakers that they brought in on the perimeter. There's a lot there to be excited about. Cam Coleman obviously drawing a lot of buzz, Perry Thompson, Bryce Kane, Malcolm Simmons, the whole host of guys. So Auburn going from year 2 to year 3, where, yes, there are some expectations for Auburn under Hugh Freeze in year 2, but big picture wise, 30,000 feet, this is a guy that you want to get as much experience as possible. So I would look for Hugh Freeze, his staff, his team over there, to get Walker White prepared, find a way to get him in. Maybe you see some wrinkles of him, short yardage situations. Well, big frame, 230 pounds. I think they can use him around the goal line too.
Well, I'm certainly always rooting for crazy things to happen, and usually does in the world of college football. Coop, thank you so much for coming on once again. You can check out his story at cbssports.com. And as always, make sure if you want more from Cooper Petagna and Andrew Ivins that you are listening, watching to the Football Recruiting Podcast. New episodes drop every Tuesday and Wednesday. You can watch it live right here on the 247 Sports YouTube channel or listen wherever you get your podcasts.
We're good. Let's just play our brand of football. Everybody got me? It's Singleton opening 10-5 touchdown. Penn State.
They now on 3rd and long. Hauser over the middle. It's picked off. Jalen Reed gets underneath it.
Touchdown.
A lot of excitement surrounding Penn State this year, so we welcome in our friend Tyler Donohue of Lions 247. Tyler, a lot of changes to the college football landscape in general this year, and let's be real, some that really benefit Penn State, right? You don't have divisions anymore in the Big Ten, which means no more playing Ohio State and Michigan every single year, and also an expanded playoff, so more room for people to party. But with all that fun, how much extra pressure does that potentially put on a coach like James Franklin?
I think it legitimately puts a lot more pressure on him because a lot of the built-in excuses that you could understand and kind of rationalize, they are now out the door. Now there's 12 teams invited to this thing. Penn State's kind of been the poster child for one of those programs that's been perennially left on the doorstep. A lot of New Year's 6 bowl games, 11-win seasons, but no playoff appearances. And big part of that reason is they have shared the East Division with Michigan and Ohio State. They haven't beaten the Buckeyes since 2016 when they won the Big Ten last. They haven't beaten Michigan since 2020. So naturally, to get rid of one of those teams on your schedule would seem like a footstep in the right direction. A matchup against Washington at one point looked a lot more dicey than it does now because that program has gone through some changes. They've got a road trip to Southern Cal to bring in that Pac-12 flair. So there are some interesting dynamics here. West Virginia is kind of a sneaky opener on the road, and then a tricky trip to Wisconsin later on in the season. So there's opportunity for pitfalls, but there's a good chance where you can bounce back from 2 losses. For so long now, it's felt like James Franklin's been walking on eggshells. Once you get that first loss, you can't lose again, or you got no shot to get to Indianapolis in the Big Ten championship game. Now, you can probably afford to lose 2 losses along the way and find yourself right there in the mix to play in the postseason.
The pressure really is relative, but we can both assume, too, there might be a little bit on a guy like Drew Aller as he enters his 2nd year as the starter. What are the let's go with realistic expectations for him in year 2 under center?
Well, you'd think a big step forward with the offensive coordinator change. James Franklin did this for a reason, and part of it is to give the best opportunity for this former 5-star recruit to flourish in his 3rd year on campus. Andy Kotelnicki was recognized by 247 Sports as Offensive Coordinator of the Year for what he did at Kansas last season. Enter that into the equation where he just saw his fired offensive coordinator before Thanksgiving. I mean, no one saw that coming when they got off to a strong start last year. Drew Aller threw for 325 yards in the season opener. Big performance in a win over West Virginia. He didn't reach 240 passing yards, go over that mark again until after Thanksgiving. Kind of hard to believe, but that's how kind of uninspiring the offensive attack was through the air during the year, and that's a big part of the reason why Mike Yurcich lost his job. He had a 25-2 touchdown to interception ratio, which you'll take 10 times out of 10 for any freshman, or any first-year starter, I should say. But during that sophomore campaign, failed to complete 50% of his passes in 5 different games. 3 of them happened in losses. And you can look at a lot of different reasons, but when you're the former number 1 quarterback in the country at 247 Sports and you're stepping up to the plate expected to elevate an offense that Sean Clifford had led for the last 4 years, and that doesn't happen, people are expecting a big jump in year 3, and Kotelnicki's a big part of that equation as well.
Speaking of recruiting and recruiting rankings, it certainly helps Penn State's recruiting pitch to say, hey, look, we had 2 guys drafted in the 1st round this past year, an offensive tackle, Olu Fashanu, and the defensive end, Chop Robinson. Unfortunately, though, that means for the current Penn State Nittany Lions, they don't have them. So who steps up to replace those 2 guys?
Yeah, well, look, Olu is going to be a hard spot for anyone to fill. An All-American, two-time All-Big Ten player, Player of the Year kind of candidate. But they got guys who have experience in Drew Shelton. He stepped up for Olu Fashanu back in the 2022 season. Started the last 5 games when Fashanu was sidelined. That included a Rose Bowl victory. He played 300-plus snaps last year as the primary backup on both sides of the offensive tackle equation. So he's in play, but he missed spring practice. He was sidelined for undisclosed reasons, recovering from an offseason procedure. And that opened the door for Javen Williams, a former 5-star prospect, to get a lot of work at left tackle. He started the spring game with the first team unit. He's a guy that has a lot of the physical intangibles you look for, but unlike Shelton, we just haven't gotten a look at him in Power 4 action. And then on the right side, Anthony Donka was a late bloomer last year. He focused on guard for much of his first year on campus, but in place of Caden Wallace in the second half of the Peach Bowl, really impressed, and that was his first game, high school level or college level, playing the offensive tackle position. His momentum has carried through spring ball. We're all curious to see what it means for the summer, but he also faces competition. Nolan Rucci came in by way of transfer. He's a former 5-star Pennsylvania high school product. Nittany Lions legacy, who opted to go to Wisconsin to begin his college football career. Didn't see a lot of action, but he got some work in their bowl game last year. Seemed to give him some confidence. So him and Anthony Donka are 2 to watch in the right tackle spot. I think Phil Troutwine, the offensive line coach, has the pieces. And then at defensive end, you actually got a plethora of options that they're really excited about. Even with losing Chop Robinson and then the 3rd-round pick, Adisa Isaac, who went to the Baltimore Ravens, you've got a freshman All-American who turned into the first-team All-Big Ten linebacker last year, and Abdul Carter now making his move as an edge rusher. And everyone's excited for this. We didn't get to see Micah Parsons play a junior season because of what happened in 2020. He was one of the many stars who opted out of a strange season that we weren't sure was going to actually happen. But Carter, we do get year 3. We get to see that process of him growing up. And unlike Parsons, they've already unleashed him a bit as an edge rusher. He broke through with 6.5 sacks as a freshman, and he followed that up last year with a really strong November. It wasn't really the start-to-finish dominance that we expected to see from him as a sophomore, but I think the stage is set now by the way he finished last season, and now what we've seen in some flashes during the spring ball and what we've heard from feedback, he's ready to maybe rise up as the next first-round pick at the defensive end spot for them. And Denai Dennis Sutton could join him in round 1. You look at some of those early 2025 mock drafts, the former 5-star is in the thick of those things. And so he's a big presence at defensive end. And then a veteran named Amin Vanover, year 5 for him, but he is ready to roll. He had a big performance in the spring game. And one other name I'll throw your way because he could be that next man up, maybe the future first-round prospect to follow. Jameel Lyons, by way of Philadelphia, turned a lot of heads on the practice field during his freshman year, showed us some things in the postseason. He might be ready to rumble as a complementary piece off the edge.
Sounds like a lot of great options there. I asked you about 2 guys leaving. How about 2 guys coming in? Julian Fleming and A.J. Harris. What have you seen from those 2 transfers early on in the spring?
Yeah, they're about their business. That's kind of the verdict that we got early on about both of these guys. They're at different phases of their career. Julian Fleming, a former #1 overall receiver at 247Sports when he came out of the high school level, coming out of Pennsylvania. There were some hard feelings among Penn State fans that he wasn't wearing a Nittany Lions uniform for the last 4 years. He went off to Columbus. He ended up being a starter for Ohio State. He started 20 of the last 23 games there in Columbus, but he shared the room with a bunch of first-round picks, Heisman Trophy contenders. And he admitted to us, he learned a lot about himself. It was a humbling experience. And unfortunately for him, although he played a bunch with the Buckeyes, he was never healthy. He has said this is the healthiest he has been since high school. Surgeries are now past him, and he hopes to really deliver. He took advantage of that COVID eligibility, came back home. He's going to have family and friends supporting him. And there's a lot of excitement about the leadership he has already brought to the receiver room. This is a receiver room that we'll get to it in a bit. There's a lot of question marks about it. He's maybe stabilized things a bit because of his background. And then A.J. Harris, again, a former 5-star. So the pedigree is there in terms of the prospect profile. But he came into Georgia's situation last year as kind of one of their big newcomers, defending national champions for the Bulldogs. So anytime you're talking about one of their hotshot freshmen, you want to focus on that guy. And he played a bit, but was kind of shut down in terms of the cornerback competition as the season progressed, and ultimately hit the transfer portal, looked for greener pastures, and Penn State quickly made a move. I think one thing they were impressed by when the staff got on the phone early with A.J. Harris was how much he knew already about what Penn State wants to accomplish schematically. He did his homework, and that kind of was a really good first step. He came into campus, and not only was he prepared like a professional, although he's only a sophomore, but he also lit it up in the blue-white game. He was probably the most impressive defensive player in terms of what they were able to do from start to finish in that spring game. And he was playing kind of on the JV unit. A lot of the transfers were over there. So he didn't actually have the arsenal of a great supporting cast, and he really stood out. So I think there's a lot of excitement brewing about him and Julian Fleming, both sides of the ball. And they're going to need someone to step up at cornerback. They lose about 1,500 snaps from their departed top 3 cornerbacks on last year's squad.
You mentioned wanting to talk about the wide receiver room. You're not the only one. This feels like a storyline we've been talking about for a while with Penn State. I got to ask you, how much are we going to continue this discussion as it leads in to the 2024 season?
I host a podcast twice a week during the offseason, and we pretty much hit on it each episode, it feels like, because it looms so large in Drew Aller's development and what Andy Kotelnicki is going to be able to accomplish as the offensive coordinator here. And even with Fleming in the equation, someone who's played a bunch, they still don't have a receiver who has 1,000 career receiving yards. You thought you had one coming out of spring ball or going into spring ball with Keandre Lambert-Smith. We were all kind of surprised that he was with Penn State for year 5. He used his COVID eligibility, but he entered the transfer portal after spring ball by the end of spring ball, and he's at Auburn now. So he's done. And Julian Fleming, he's got to be healthy. That's a bit of an if, and you kind of apply that to Harrison Wallace too. We were hearing things about Harrison Wallace coming out of preseason camp last year that he was going to be the #1 target, even with Keandre Lambert-Smith on campus. He ended up being nicked up in September, ended up being nicked up later, but he led the team in receptions with 7 of them in the 2023 season opener. He then led the team in receptions, reached the end zone in the Peach Bowl. So him and Drew Aller do have some chemistry going. Can he be healthy? That's the key for both Harrison Wallace and Julian Fleming. And just some younger names to know. You got Caden Saunders. He's going to do some damage out of the slot, former top 100 recruit. Hasn't really done much in the production department in the last couple of weeks, couple of years on campus. And then Sean Clifford, former quarterback. His younger brother has kind of blossomed as a versatile component of this receiver group. Liam Clifford, he's a 4th-year player. So they need guys to step up. Marcus Hagans is in his 2nd year as receivers coach here. He's got some transfer flavor in there. They've got a lot of homegrown talent. If they don't get answers there, that is going to be the hot topic of this season for Penn State.
Thank you, Tyler. You can check out Lions 24/7 for all things Penn State, from upcoming visit weekends to just getting you ready for the season. The crew at Lions 24/7 has you covered. We are shifting gears completely on this show to talk a little baseball. Super regionals in full swing, and you were taking a look at some of the super sites. The #1 national seed Tennessee playing host to Cinderella Evansville. Everyone in action this weekend is a series win away from punching a ticket to Omaha for the College World Series. Let's welcome on 247 Sports national writer Brad Crawford. I have to catch myself. Usually I bring you in as national college football writer, but you're putting on your baseball hat today. We're going to preview some of these matchups and do kind of superlative style. So let's start with, what is your most intriguing regional matchup?
I am expecting a doozy between NC State and Georgia at Foley Field in Athens. The ACC has 5 teams left in super regional play in this tournament. Only one of them is not a national top 8 seed, and that's NC State. Bulletin board material right there. In the other dugout, you have Georgia. Obviously hasn't advanced to a College World Series since 2008, and they're projected by #1 overall MLB draft pick here in a couple weeks, Charlie Condon, the best hitter in baseball. NC State will do what it can to kind of pitch around him this weekend. And they should have some fresh arms, because last weekend NC State only played 3 games in its Raleigh Regional, 1 out there. So we could be looking at, Emily, a ACC-SEC invitational in Omaha, and this matchup is kind of a precursor of sorts.
Seems to be trending that way. 2 national seeds going head-to-head. I mentioned the matchup between Tennessee and Evansville. Not necessarily the case there, and not the case everywhere. So that leads me to my next one. Which team is on upset alert?
Yeah, keep an eye on Clemson hosting Florida this weekend. The Gators were the last team, one of the last teams in the NCAA tournament this past month, 28-27 overall during the regular season. But they've got some crazy good talent on that roster. They can really knock the cover off the baseball. Jack Caglione leading the charge. He's hitting .410 this season. Tower power hitter with 31 home runs in this season alone. This is not Kevin O'Sullivan's best team he's had at Florida, considering that he already does have 1 CWS title there in Gainesville. But there's enough talent, Emily, to get back to that Final Eight in a few weeks in Omaha and potentially scare Clemson and maybe force a 3-game super regional.
Okay, so the first two questions led to SEC versus ACC. Maybe let's go out of those two conferences a bit here and tell us about your sleeper team.
Yeah, sleeper team to watch for me this weekend is Oregon. Ducks only gave up 4 runs, I think it was, last weekend during regional play, including back-to-back shutouts. So this pitching staff right now for Oregon is really rolling. I don't expect many runs to be scored in College Station this weekend, given Texas A&M's stable of arms as well. The Aggies are the number 3 national seed after a terrific season in the SEC, but I think Oregon is a bit undervalued here. It would not surprise me a bit if there's a couple pitchers duels there in College Station and the Ducks possibly punch their ticket to Omaha.
All right, speaking of Omaha, we're just going to skip to the end. Give us your pick for who will be the champion of the College World Series.
I hate to go chalk here, but Tennessee has never won a national championship in baseball. Finished runner-up once. That was way back long before us in 1951. But this is the summer that I think it happens. Number 1 overall seed in the tournament. Have a good draw, as you've mentioned, in Evansville. Tony Vitello's team has several flamethrowers at the top of that pitching staff. Very good bullpen. Team ERA right now is like 3.80, which is number 3 to number 4 nationally. Best pitching staff left in this tournament outside of Virginia. And the Vols have 5 players in that starting lineup with at least 17 home runs and 60 RBIs. So that's a tough team to get out. Tennessee's very impressive.
Don't feel bad about going chalk. It's okay. I will accept that here. Also a team, that goes yard once or twice or 158 times for a school record this year. So they are certainly a fun team to watch. Brad, thanks so much for being here and breaking that all down for us. The baseball hat looks good on you. We appreciate it. You can check out more of his work at 247sports.com. We will have tons of coverage for all the baseball fans out there, and it will not slow down once the field is set for Omaha. So make sure that you are checking all of that out, along with, of course, our typical unrivaled recruiting and college football coverage. That'll do it for us here on 247 Sports Live. Thanks for watching.